what if Bitcoin miners aren't stealing energy, but are actually the secret key to global energy abundance and energy grid stability? In this episode, I'm joined by Adam Swick, who made the transition from high finance to the physical trenches of Bitcoin mining. Adam explains how Bitcoin mining acts as a flexible load, a tool that can turn on and off in seconds to save the electrical grid when demand spikes, especially in the computing arms race that is currently taking place with the growth of AI. And stick around to hear Adam's airline analogy that explains why Bitcoin mining might actually be a net good for every energy consumer on the planet. All right, let's dive in. Adam Swick, welcome to Bitcoin for Millennials.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Lots of exciting stuff to talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can talk about because I think you're a great guest to kind of extend upon what I've been exploring in like recent episodes. I've talked about, how Bitcoin acts as this truth machine for finance and personal agency, but I think you are more in the trenches of turning the raw energy into this digital truth, right? That I think is the starting point for the more philosophical talk. So eventually in your Bitcoin career, you moved from Kraken to Marathon Mining. What did you learn, like being on one side of this Bitcoin thing, right? Like being on an exchange, a really big exchange, to eventually ending up on one of the biggest miners. Like what kind of bridge did you discover?
Sure. And again, this is the spin that I take, and I can talk about energy and Bitcoin all day long, and also happy to not talk about energy, but to talk about it. Coming from Kraken, an exchange where I was used to dealing with cryptocurrency, obviously, crypto and Bitcoin is a very deep rabbit hole, and the more you know, the more you realize you don't know, and you could spend forever thinking about it philosophically, technically, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I first joined a big Bitcoin miner, I thought that I understood the more difficult side. Mining is where Bitcoin and energy intersect. I thought that Bitcoin was the complicated side, and it would be easy to get up to speed on the energy side. And in retrospect, I think that may have been flip-flopped. The energy world is extremely complex, almost concerningly so. I have a new appreciation for when I flip the light switch that the light bulb turns on. It's like miraculous that this thing holds together and that the grid works. And so that was the biggest learning. And then to your point, a lot of technical learning in terms of, at Kraken, I understood that there was a blockchain. I understood that there was miners out there. I understood that they used energy, but a lot of technical deep dives to understand how this actually works, how pools work, how firmware works on the machine, et cetera, et cetera. But beyond the technical, a whole nother batch of philosophical learning in terms of why is Bitcoin proof of work? Why are we choosing to spend energy to secure this thing? Again, which I could talk forever about. And so, a very deep dive into one of the bedrocks of Bitcoin, which I was super fortunate to have. And again, some of you may be out there and say, I don't need to go down that level of detail. And again, you don't have to go down to the philosophical underpinnings of energy and Bitcoin and how they're intertwined. But for the people that are intrigued, it's another great deep rabbit hole to learn a lot about.
Yeah. So I know you came from a high finance background. Yeah. So I can also imagine that when you discover Bitcoin and what we talk about a lot is that, well, if you come from a high class, like a classic high finance background, you have a certain paradigm which you use to look at the world. I think Bitcoin is something that shakes that up. But then moving to a miner, I can imagine there were other insights that you gained with regards to money and energy that you perhaps didn't even see before. Could you maybe share like some of those insights and what changed perhaps the paradigm for you that you were taught and how you view it differently now?
Sure. There's a couple of really big paradigms, and I'll describe it as just like you said, coming from traditional finance to the world of crypto, a lot of things break in your brain. But so too with energy. The energy world is a very big dinosaur of an industry, and having the cryptocurrency mining world come and disrupt it in a big way and start asking questions that have never been asked before, I think is really still just starting to awaken and shaken the energy industry. And I think the world of AI data centers is a second wave. And so I feel like Bitcoin mining started to try to challenge and cause the energy ecosystem to innovate, and now AI is really forcing it to. So some examples, Bitcoin mining is extremely unique because of how interruptible it is. And so Bitcoin mines, you have these highly specialized computers that all they can do is mine Bitcoin. But the nice part of them is you can turn them on and off pretty quickly. And so think about it. Amazon's data centers, if they go down for 10 seconds, the world's GDP is affected if you can't buy on Amazon for 10 seconds that day. But Bitcoin miners is the opposite, is there's no such thing as being 98, 99% done Bitcoin mining, and then you unplug it and you have to restart. No, it's kind of constant of these guessing of numbers. And so that interruptibility, that ability to turn on and off is incredibly unique. That combined with the fact that Bitcoin mining consumes a lot of energy, you suddenly have a huge consumer of energy that turns on and off. And the energy world is not used to that. And this is a very good thing. So what I mean by that is the grid is in constant balance. And so supply has to equal demand at the grid at all time. If they're jamming too much electricity into the grid and it's not being taken anywhere, that's bad. And if there's too much demand and there's not enough electricity, that's bad. And we know what happens there. And so historically, the grid has only had one tool to fix that. If demand goes up, you have to increase supply of electricity, which means you have to run around and turn on some gas plants. You have to turn on some coal plants. You have to think of other things to turn on because you can't mess with demand. People are turning on their air conditioners, running their dishwashers, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's hard to do if you have a supply and demand balance and you can really only mess with one side. And it's hard to mess with demand. You get those letters from your utility saying, hey, it's going to be a hot day today. Please don't run your air conditioners. That's the best they can do to try to control the demand side of the energy equation. And similarly, if they see a really hot day coming up, you look at your list of big energy consumers and, you call the local steel mill and you say, hey, big steel factory, you use a lot of energy. We could use some. Could you give some back? The steel factory will say, great, we need 3 days in order to safely turn down all of our processes and shut it down. Suddenly you have Bitcoin mining come in, which consumes large amounts of electricity, and you can turn on and off within seconds. And so suddenly this is an incredibly powerful new tool for the energy world. Because if 100 megawatts of people turn on their air conditioners on a really hot day, you can call your Bitcoin miners and say, hey, can you turn off 100 megawatts? And with the flip of a switch, you suddenly have 100 megawatts available again. And so that seesaw balance you're trying to do is much more easy to control because now you have a lever to pull on the supply side and a lever to pull on the demand side. And this kind of breaks the brain of a lot of energy people because since the dawn of electricity, we really haven't had that ability. And so it was kind of fun and exciting way getting to deal with a lot of these legacy energy companies. And at first, they're very scared to talk to you as a Bitcoin miner because they think you're just going to come in and take a lot of energy. But once they start to talk to you and they understand that actually you're a tool to help them, they get incredibly excited because they've never had anything like this. Granted, sometimes it takes a while for them to wrap their head around it. But I don't know, there's one example of part of the fun of Bitcoin and kind of just changing the way that people have been set in their ways forever and industries have been set on their way forever.
When it comes to holding Bitcoin securely, peace of mind starts with architecture. OnRamp's multi-institution custody model distributes control access across 3 independent regulated key holders in a 2 of 3 multi-sig quorum. No single point of failure, no pooled or omnibus exposure, just segregated client-titled vaults. You retain full legal ownership while OnRamp coordinates security, compliance, and operational workflows behind the scenes. Multi-institution custody is the foundation for everything that OnRamp builds. Sound infrastructure that distributes counterparty risk and provides fault-tolerant resilience with clear audits and institutional controls. And now OnRamp is piloting flat, predictable pricing to make best-in-class Bitcoin custody and financial products more accessible than ever. Visit onrampbitcoin.com to learn more and sign up with code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. on-ramp. Strength in many, simplicity in one. Hey there, just a quick note before we continue. The podcast has really been growing and I'm super grateful for that. Over 70,000 people tune in regularly, but I've also seen that about 60% of you still haven't subscribed yet. So if you enjoy what I'm doing, if you think the content is valuable, I want to ask you to subscribe on YouTube and please like any video that you find value in. This really helps me to fuel the YouTube algorithm and also to reach more people with the message on Bitcoin. I want to thank you for your support. Now let's continue. We were introduced by Daniel Batten, who I want to say famously was a staunch opponent of Bitcoin until he, because he was really into energy and environment, etc. Until he realized, wait a minute, I can use Bitcoin mining in the way that you just described, right? These are the only power-hungry computers that I can actually turn on and off in a few seconds, which is a good thing because, and I checked this with him and I want to check it with you too. Sure. I think it's so astonishing that people don't understand that even if you hate Bitcoin, even if you don't like it or think it's useless or whatever, the fact that there is a constant demand for any created energy, right? So there's a constant buyer for any created energy when you don't have any other buyers that would pay more, right? I think is something that should be added. That makes the return on investment and the infrastructure and the use of the infrastructure 100%, if not more. So I think it's just astonishing that people don't really see the use case. Again, if you don't really like Bitcoin, it is irrelevant, right? If you have 100 million or 500 million or whatever renewable energy resource park, whether it's wind, water, or solar, you want to be able to sell your energy at any time to any buyer, right?
Yeah, perfect example. Again, a very real world example of that is Mara has a joint venture in the UAE doing Bitcoin mining. And the UAE was a very interesting geography because it's super hot in the Middle East. And so on the hot summer days, everybody runs their air conditioning and you have this huge spike in energy demand. However, at night, and for the 8 months of the year when it's not summer, there's a much lower demand for electricity. And so there's a very high and a much lower average, if that makes sense. And so you're faced with this decision. Do you build enough nuclear and solar to meet the peak? Or do you just tell people, hey, on the super hot days, we can't meet your demand? That's not a very good answer. And so you do build enough solar and enough nuclear and enough gas plants to meet the peak energy demand. But then to your point, most of the year, that it just sits there unused. It's waiting for that one really hot day. And so if you funded a big new fancy solar farm or a big new gas plant and it's being used for 7 days a year, that's tough to justify an ROI on that. You're going to have to charge a lot for that electricity when you run it for 7 days to pay off your investment. But suddenly a Bitcoin miner can come in and say, hey, you're only used for 7 days a year. How about you Bitcoin mine with us for the other 358 days a year? In exchange for that, and again, it's very symbiotic. In exchange for that, the Bitcoin miner wants cheaper electricity. But they're saying, hey, sell us the cheaper electricity and you can tell us when not to turn on and turn off. The best example I've come up with is airlines. Imagine if somebody went to the airline and said, I promise to buy every empty seat on your plane. Yeah. I would like it to be clear, I need it to be a cheap seat. I want you to sell it to me cheap. But in exchange, if somebody else wants it, you can sell it to them and you can tell me last second how many seats I have and I promise to buy every empty seat. How excited would an airline be to know that they can fill every seat? That's kind of, again, what a Bitcoin miner is doing. And so, yeah, it's easy to hear on first headline that Bitcoin mining uses a lot of energy and say, that's bad. And it would be bad if you're stealing energy from mom and pop store, but you're not. You're oftentimes the Bitcoin miners are rational players that are saying, hey, energy price is very low right now because there is more supply and demand. Therefore, I'm going to Bitcoin mine. And hey, once demand goes up, prices go up, and I want to unplug and give that energy back to the grid. And so if you take the time to understand it, you recognize it's arguably a net good and a net new tool in the global grid that is really going to benefit us all.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the plane example is really good, right? Because there's also something that Daniel told me is that only like one third of all the created energy is actually used and also paid for, right, by the end consumers. But in order to have a positive business case on whatever is creating the energy, you do actually have to pay for the 100%, right? So in general, end consumers are paying way more, perhaps 2 or 3 times more than what it should cost. And if you can always be occupied 100%, to keep with the airplane analogy, then the overall cost also comes down. But I think now we have this kind of like computing arms race with AI, which I think is way more, I don't want to say forced, but it's more inevitable than just the general growth of a country, a nation, a bloc, or whatever, because AI in this sense is kind of inevitable. So countries have to play. There's a lot of Bitcoin miners, I think, including Mara, that have also adopted AI compute and etc. Do you see them as a competitor? Do you see them as a partner? Yeah, what is kind of your view on this convergence that's happening now?
Yeah, I have a lot of complex thoughts there. And so to your point, on first look, you kind of say, wow, Bitcoin mining and AI data centers must be very similar. And yes, they are, because they both use computers and they both use electricity. But once you get beyond that, they are pretty different. As mentioned, Bitcoin miners can turn on and off. Bitcoin miners, the actual devices themselves, the actual computers, are pretty rugged. Oftentimes these Bitcoin miners can be air-cooled devices. Some are liquid-cooled. There's a lot of different. Anyway, I would consider it more Wild West. I don't know, more like a tank. These AI data centers are the opposite. Right now, there is so much hype in AI, so much money to be made in AI. These AI data centers are commanding 99.999% uptime. So there's a major difference. Bitcoin miners don't need 99.99% uptime of electricity. AI does. Another one, high-speed internet. Bitcoin mining does not require high-speed internet. Oftentimes, Bitcoin mines can operate just on satellite Starlink internet. AI obviously requires high-speed fiber. And so there's another difference. In terms of the infrastructure, Bitcoin miners can sometimes just use shipping containers to hold their Bitcoin miners. And you're roughly talking $500,000 per megawatt of infrastructure, like the stuff. AI, again, these chips are very delicate. They require very delicate coolants, oftentimes liquid cooling. And oftentimes you're talking $10 million per megawatt of infrastructure. So 20 times as much infrastructure, containers, cables, networking, cooling around the actual chips themselves. And so kind of different at the base layer. And so what does that mean today? Right now, AI is very much on an upswing. And so there is a benefit with how much money they make, how valuable AI is today. There is some benefit to talking to the Bitcoin miners that have huge amounts of power and converting their sites over. Because even if you can shave, your alternative is just starting with a flat piece of dirt and building your AI data center. But if you can shave even a few months off in terms of that timeline, it kind of pays for itself in spades because of how valuable this AI stuff is. So that's the near-term answer. The longer-term answer will be interesting because once AI starts to care about efficiency, which again, right now I would argue AI cares purely about speed to deployment and does not care about efficiency. I've never heard an AI data center say how much is the electricity cost. And eventually they will. And so then it'll be interesting to watch how AI and Bitcoin mining interact. I imagine Bitcoin mining could actually teach AI a lot of things. All traditional data centers have always had these 5 nines of uptime, but Bitcoin miners can kind of be the ones to ask the questions and say, do you really need those 5 nines of uptime? Or instead, if you have a data center in New York with 80% uptime and a data center in LA with 80% uptime, does that portfolio of data centers suddenly have 99.9% uptime? And is there some way to, harness that? AI data centers, you're constantly looking for more power. If you're willing to give up that 99.99% uptime, you can access a lot more power. And so I think that Bitcoin miners have kind of pushed the envelope on a lot where AI data centers can learn a lot from them, but it'll come at a time when AI starts to care about efficiency. And again, we're just not there today. It's all just speed.
You're giving me a thought about how Bitcoin mining could actually help in also the decentralization of all these AI server, I want to say park centers, whatever. I don't even know, data centers. Wouldn't that actually help if like the AI computing power would also be more localized, if that makes sense, right? So if I use AI here, I use a data center that is closer, so my latency is lower, etc. Results quicker and all these things, where maybe not 100% of the computing power in this local data center would be used. But then you would have that addition of Bitcoin mining. So you could actually do that, right? Kind of like this Amazon type model where you have like distribution centers in different places, so you're eventually closer to the end consumer.
Yeah, I think AI could learn a lot about, again, from decentralization. It's kind of the opposite right now. All you hear about AI is these massive, multi-gigawatt single sites, which again is exciting and perhaps better suited for inference better suited for training when you need a lot of GPUs connected to each other to act like one big brain to create a new model. But once you switch to inference, like you said, and actually using the model, a decentralized network kind of makes a lot of sense to me. And then again, dreaming, you start to think about things like, I don't know, I'm awake from, make it up, easy hours, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., I'm interacting with AI. But from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., I'm not. And so what is that data center doing? It's probably sitting there idle and underutilized. And so can you kind of pair a Bitcoin mine with an AI data center? And the AI data center gets priority access to the power. But when AI is not using it, can you Bitcoin mine with it? And again, suddenly make better use of that power connection. And okay, in my simple example of 12 hours, that's easy. But then how micro can you get? Can you get down to the level of seconds where, again, I ask a query and it responds, and then quick Bitcoin mine, and like we're at that level. So a lot of potential exciting benefits down in the future about how these worlds interact.
Yeah. And so when you think about this future and kind of this convergence, what does that apply? What does that imply for energy use around the world? I think there is a consensus about really upscaling new energy sources, whether or not it's renewable. I think that's a different discussion, right? But just the upscaling of it, I think there's a consensus on that. If Bitcoin mining could play a role there, what do you think could be the effect on the security and decentralization of Bitcoin, to see if as a Bitcoin miner you can actually tap into this kind of like parallel development that's happening in the world?
Yeah, two thoughts there. Number one is I think that Bitcoin miners will always exist. They'll continue to find the most underutilized power. And so I think the, network will remain secure. And second to that is just the idea of, I think AI can learn from Bitcoin miners, because Bitcoin miners, 5 years ago, maybe longer now, 6 years ago, were very similar to AI in that they were just looking for huge amounts of power everywhere, and they were a customer. I choose that word intentionally. So they were calling the utility and they would say, hello, I'd like to buy a huge amount of power. Please sell it to me, the end. They then realized that wasn't competitive, and they had to switch from being a customer to a partner of the energy companies. And that's where we talk about the interruptibility, these contracts that say, hey, power company, you can tell me when to turn on and turn off, working with the power company rather than just saying, I'm a demanding customer, give me my energy when I need it. And so Bitcoin miners learn that. And so I think AI will learn that as well. And so I think that's the longer term. We're going to build out more energy, et cetera, et cetera. And I think AI will learn to be a partner not just a customer like they are today. So that's number one. And then number two, on Bitcoin mining, again, they'll probably learn how to work symbiotically with these AI data centers because Bitcoin miners are incentivized to seek out the cheapest power. And the cheapest power oftentimes rhymes with the most underutilized power. And so that's another way that Bitcoin miners have kind of really broken the brains of the energy company is, again, for centuries, we've been saying, okay, we create energy and we have to find a way to get it to demand. And so hence all these transmission lines. And it's all about getting the energy to where it's consumed. Bitcoin miners flip that on its head by saying, what if we bring the demand, if we bring the energy consumption to where the energy is produced? And so that's something going on in Bitcoin right now, which I imagine will happen with AI further down the road. And again, the perfect example there is flare gas mining is, again, oil and gas is a huge industry. People are digging in the ground looking for oil, and oftentimes they hit methane as a byproduct. It comes out of the ground. They run the numbers. It does not make sense to try to capture the methane, to try to truck it to someone that needs the methane. And so what do? We light it on fire. Like, that's the best idea we've come up with as a civilization is when we hit methane, just light it on fire. And suddenly Bitcoin miners were like, hey, what if we bring our computers to you and you plop a generator down on top of the methane, and suddenly this gas that you used to just light on fire is suddenly printing money. Like, that's mind-boggling. And again, like, industry shifting, shaking, what a major change that is of taking a waste product and now turning it into gold, or digital gold, to steal your phrase. And again, I think AI will start to think of, that's a pretty major mindset shift from right now. They are saying, dear energy companies, sell me a gigawatt of power and I am your customer, to working your way all the way to say, where's an available electron? And I think Bitcoin miners will continue to seek out that methane, that flare gas, that, any molecule or electron that is underutilized. Bitcoin miners will find it because they're incentivized to. And so the network will remain strong and secure, and it'll just become all the more exciting what a net benefit for the planet it is as it seeks out the underutilized energy.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that putting the burning the methane is only a good idea because it's less bad for the environment than just letting the methane go, right? Yeah, it's very simplistic. Yeah, I'm also thinking like in the future, like you just said, like a computer or an AI. Probably an AI could determine in milliseconds whether an electron should go to a Bitcoin miner or an AI model, right? How far do you think? How far away do you think we are from that in general? And maybe also, I don't know. I think it's a fun question because I think the pace of AI is mind-boggling to me. I don't know if I'm too much in the Twitter X bubble to just see what people are doing, but I think this is a really inevitable technology, and it will only go faster and faster and faster, right? So what is a timeline for you?
I mean, to paint that vision again, like I share it with you, is imagine one site that produces power. So maybe it's like a gas generator or a solar site or what have you. So something makes energy. You have batteries sitting there. You have a data center sitting there. You have a Bitcoin mine sitting there. And you're connected to the grid, and you have an AI running this site. And just think about how awesome that could be in terms of it could say things like, wow, it's really sunny today, and a lot of people, and it's a business day, so a lot of people are using AI, so let's put all of our energy towards the normal data center. Okay, it's night and not a lot of people are using AI, let's Bitcoin mine. Oh wait, tomorrow's a really hot day, so we're gonna have, tomorrow a lot of people are gonna need to run their air conditioners, so actually stop Bitcoin mining and let's fill up the batteries because we're probably gonna need them tomorrow. And so this would be like, to your point, so mind-bendingly cool and create so much value if we can do that. So how do we have to do that? A lot of the technology is already built. However, it has to become cheaper and better. Batteries is at the top of that list. The ability to store electrons is tough today. It's getting cheaper every day. A lot of people are working on it. So that's the first thing that has to happen. And I have confidence that'll be solved in terms of your timeline question. The harder question for me is just getting a bunch of industries that are used to doing things the same way to change.
For my European friends that want to buy Bitcoin with ease, check out Relay. I've been a longtime fan and happy to partner up with what I think is the best Bitcoin-only platform for Europeans. They offer a super simple, beginner-friendly app with no distractions and no shitcoins. You can do a quick one-time smash buy or set up automatic purchases when you're stacking regularly. And here's the thing that matters most. Relay is 100% self-custody. Every set you hold is yours. Your keys, your coins. If you want to get started, download the app via my link below or in the description and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, at checkout to get 10% off your fees. A huge shout out to Relay for sponsoring the show. Now let's continue.
That picture you and I just painted of this AI run thing is going to freak a lot of energy people out. These energy people wake up every day, and rightfully so, all they think about all day, every day is making sure nothing breaks, which is great because that means our light bulbs always turn on. But there's going to have to be some learning, a lot of tests, a lot of trials. And again, as somebody that has my light bulbs work every day, I would not want them to test it in my region. And this is not going to be like a one-day test and suddenly you have faith in it. This is going to be multi-year test type thing. And so I'm sure I'll see it in my lifetime. I don't think it's going to be in the next year, maybe trials before we have faith in it and have widespread adoption. But to your point, it feels like that the AI agent that runs it, it feels like we're so close there. So that piece, check. Bitcoin mining, we can do really well. Maybe we can reduce the response time for Bitcoin miners to turn on and off. So, a soft check, it can be done, maybe it can be done a little better. Similar with AIs, obviously we can run a normal data center, but maybe we could get a little better in terms of responding on and off for the data center. Batteries need to get cheaper. I don't know. So a non-answer to your question, but some technological needed, but a lot of change management. And hopefully people start to think about this and talk about this so that they're ready for it when it comes.
Yeah, I think it's just an interesting question to kind of philosophize around, right? Like I once heard that if you put all the batteries in Europe together, you can contain all the created energy at that moment for like 12 seconds or something like that, right? So this whole capability of, and also what you just said, I think is also interesting, right? Like the moving of the energy towards the place where it's then needed, just the idea of that entire process and management and trying to anticipate, should it go, very basic, should it go left or should it go right, and once you send it, that way, it cannot go that way anymore. So it's too late. So I just think this is just another interesting example of where Bitcoin kind of moves into this old type of industry and old type of thinking and just says, well, you can also do it this way. Yeah. But the fact that is so radical compared to how it's been operated before, I just think it's very interesting that is like another angle of Bitcoin in a totally different industry and something you wouldn't really think about when you first discover Bitcoin as better money or digital gold or something like that.
I mean, another really real story to share is to your point about routing things left or right, but there's another dimension, which is time. And so in a lot of these developing countries, make it up, your population's like doubling every year. And so you need to build new energy. And so you're going to go build a new solar farm or a new hydro dam. How big are you going to make it? Are you going to make it enough for today, knowing that next year your population is going to be double and you're going to be underwater and you're a country that's trying to attract businesses to you? Or are you going to make a giant solar farm and a giant hydro dam? But if you make a giant solar farm and a giant hydro dam, it's going to sit empty for the next several years while you grow into the capacity. And so again, Bitcoin miners are another perfect answer there, where the Bitcoin miner can come in and say, yes, build the giant dam. We will use all the power, and every year we'll take 10% of our Bitcoin miners away. We'll like move out. And so as the population grows up, the Bitcoin mining, and so there's like this time dimension too. And so there's moving electrons, like you said, across the country, but there's also, it's like a funny way to like move time in a certain way, of saying, you're going to need more demand. You're going to need more energy in 10 years, build for it now, and we'll help you bridge the gap until that. And so, I don't know, this is what I mean, breaks your mind in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, you mentioned you mentioned the project that Mara has in the desert basically, and you worked on different things in Abu Dhabi and Africa, I think, South America. When you talk to someone in that country or someone from the government or who's into the energy, right, Minister of Energy or whatever. What is the hook that gets them? Is it like earn Bitcoin, become rich, or is it the practical ability that you mentioned before of just balancing their grid, making energy cheaper, or even making investments like you mentioned possible? Like, what gets a country onto starting to mine Bitcoin?
Sure. There's a wide spectrum. Some of them care about the Bitcoin. Like you said, they believe in this investment. They believe supply and demand, that price will go up. And so they want to talk a lot about it and they want to accumulate Bitcoin. But it's also very easy to have the conversation with these energy companies and never mention the word Bitcoin because they understand their problem. Again, in the UAE, to be clear, loves Bitcoin and so wanted exposure to it. But imagine they didn't. They also understood that they had this energy generation, energy demand mismatch. They understood that they had to build huge solar, gas plants, and nuclear plants to supply peak demand, and that those things were sitting idle for most of the year. And so you sit around and, imagine the board meeting where you say, hey, most of our energy generation is sitting idle for a large part of the year. What do we do? I think if you sicked a bunch of consultants on that question and they just started by doing research and said, what do you do with idle generation? Bitcoin mining is going to come up pretty quick and it's going to go to the top of that list. And so I think the powerful piece is just being able to, it's that customer versus partner discussion. It's if you show up to these countries and say, we want a bunch of energy, give it to us, it's not going to go well. If you show up to these countries and say, what energy problems are you facing? Or do you have this time question of you want to build a big hydro dam, but you don't have use to it today? Do you have this intraday question where you use a lot of energy during the day, but not at night? And kind of hear what the problem is first. I guarantee that Bitcoin mining is an answer somehow to fit into there. And positioning yourself as a solution and as a partner is going to get you a lot farther than the demanding customer saying, you must give me these many megawatts. And then it only helps if they like Bitcoin too.
Yeah. Well, I think, again, for people that don't like Bitcoin, we talked about how there's quite some critics that just say, it uses, X amount of energy, that's bad, or they say miners steal power from people. You obviously argue that, this flexible load balancing actually makes power cheaper for everyone. What is your idea on how we can win this PR challenge, so to say, right? Like I think with Bitcoin we have this challenge where we say, well, it's a superior savings vehicle, right? Like you cannot use fiat money for saving. All the other alternatives you have are actually assets that you never truly own. You can do that with Bitcoin. You can move it across borders. Blah blah blah. I think with this energy part, we have the same type-ish discussion, but just on a different topic with the same kind of like uninformed takes, not because people are dumb, but more because it's a difficult subject. And I think in general, not really something that a lot of people just thought about before.
So I agree with what you said. And I think, to try to think about it coming it from a good place is, I think a lot of the people that have the critiques, are coming at it from a good place. They're genuinely concerned for their neighbors. They're genuinely concerned that they don't want their energy stolen from them. They're generally concerned that they don't want their energy prices higher. And so I think the first recognition is just going to battle with them and saying, no, you're wrong, does not produce helpful results. Instead, I think the real secret is just to ask questions and get people to understand their flawed assumptions. And so think about it, if we hopped on the phone today and you asked what I had for breakfast and I said I had a 2,000 calorie breakfast. I don't know, you might say that sounds bad. And we could have this huge debate on if my breakfast was good or bad, but you have to ask the next question of what were the calories? If I said it was 2,000 calories of cake, milkshakes, butter that I had for breakfast, you might say you didn't have a really great breakfast, Adam. But if we switched and I had said I had 2,000 calories of egg whites, Greek yogurt, green smoothies, that's a very different 2,000 calories. And so you have to ask that next question of what were the calories from? And so just like these people that say, you use a lot of energy, you have to ask them the question, well, who else was going to use the energy at that time? Again, it's hard to store this stuff. Who else was going to buy that energy? Who else was going to store that energy? Okay, they use a lot of power and you're upset that they have a contract for 400 megawatts. But if they didn't have a contract for 400 megawatts, then nobody would have built that gas plant. And on that one day where it's really, really hot and everybody runs your air conditioners, you wouldn't have it because that gas plant wouldn't exist without Bitcoin miners there to make the ROI story that they should build the gas plant so that they can give it to you for that one day. And so I think, again, the energy world's complex, the Bitcoin world's complex. When these things intersect, it's super confusing. And so, again, it frustrates me when people give those erroneous headlines, but I understand that they're very complicated worlds. And so it's better to just take a breath and ask some questions. Again, do people really understand the supply and demand balance of the grid and the magic that it takes to turn on your light bulb? I know I underappreciated it before I got into Bitcoin mining. And so even asking those simple questions of being like, I mean, do you understand that balance I think that's how you have to do it, which unfortunately is not a great answer. It's a hard answer, and it means it's going to take work to combat those headlines. But I don't know, that's what I really believe.
Yeah, again, I think it's just fascinating that Bitcoin is such a huge topic where I almost feel like every week I'm like, oh, wow, it also touches this or it also touches that, right? And that it has huge implications for, I'd say, different industries and use cases, but only when people really see it. But that has to come from like a base understanding of what is actually happening today, or how that came about, and if that's good or bad, or could be better or not. So I think it'll take some years. But when you think about the future, let's say the next 10 years, let's say 2030 to 2035 ish, what makes you most bullish on Bitcoin or energy or AI?
Sure,
whatever interests you today.
Sure, I'll give two answers. On the energy side, we kind of touched on it. I'm excited for the further decentralization of Bitcoin mining. I'm really, again, 5 years ago, it was not on my radar that Bitcoin miners were going to be using flare gas. And so I'm very excited to see what other novel sources of energy Bitcoin miners find, because I truly believe they are going to be value additive to the planet in terms of reducing waste and making ROI numbers work that wouldn't work before. And again, make it up. Everybody's super excited about these small modular nuclear reactors, that might change the world. Where are you going to run that first one? Are you going to run the first small modular nuclear reactor in downtown Manhattan and see what happens? No. You're going to run the first nuclear reactor out in the middle of nowhere. What's going to use the energy out in the middle of nowhere? You're not going to build a factory out there. I bet, I'm calling it now, it's going to be a Bitcoin miner that's going to be the first user of the first test smaller nuclear reactor out in the middle of nowhere. And so, using satellite internet. So that's on the energy side. On the Bitcoin side, there's a lot of things I could talk about, but really it just boils down to supply and demand. We know the supply. And so it's really just a question of demand that you have to ask yourself. And taking a step back, do I think demand for Bitcoin is going to go up or down? The answer is demand's going to go up. It means so many different things to so many different people. Once people are open to really taking the time to understand it, I haven't come across somebody that's disliked it. The people that are anti-Bitcoin seem to be the ones that are unwilling to learn. And so with that belief, I'm excited to see the next wave of things that come and what other narratives in terms of what does Bitcoin mean to you. Again, what we've talked about, it's a lot of energy is my answer when you ask Adam, what does Bitcoin mean to you? And I think the different types of answers is only going to continue to grow exponentially for what does Bitcoin mean to you. And I don't know, I'm excited to see what happens for that in the world. And I don't know, that impacts price accordingly.
Awesome. Well, hash rate up usually is a price going up, right? So that's a good thing. I want to ask you my last question, and I ask everyone the same question, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
A core belief that I will never let go of is, I think, curiosity is never a bad thing. I think this is, again, kind of gets back to how do you combat these headlines, et cetera, is if we could do more to spur curiosity in ourselves, I could be better at it, but also just spur curiosity as a society. I think it solves a lot of problems, energy problems, financial problems. If you look about like global politics problems, if people could just start to take a step back and question why and take the time to invest in why, I think we'd be a lot better off. But it's hard, to be clear. I would say curiosity is really good and solves a lot of problems, but it's also one of the hardest things to do, is asking why. So I don't know. There's one for you.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I talk about this a lot. I think we're lucky that we're curious. Not everyone is this curious, and I think it brings you a lot, but it also can give you some headache if you are. I don't know, just into everything on top of everything, just trying to understand everything. So I'd say it's a blessing and a curse. But I wanna thank you for your time. I thought it was really interesting. I hope people find it valuable, and of course I will link to all your profiles and stuff so people can follow you. And thank you.
Amazing, thank you. Thanks to all the listeners, and please stay curious.
Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, if you want to help me shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, please like this video and subscribe to stay connected. I hope to see you for the next episode. Bye.